I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Building a brand is about more than just what happens in the marketplace. It's about what happens in the hallway. On this episode of On Brand, I'm joined by Josh Block, president of Block Imaging and author of People Matter at Work, to explore why the health of your internal culture is the ultimate predictor of your brand's external strength. Josh shares his journey of taking over a family business at 29 and the hard lessons he learned about how responsible decisions can fracture trust, and how he ultimately scaled a global organization by operationalizing the belief that people truly matter. My interview with Josh is coming right up, but first, Josh Block, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be with you, Nick.
So I am excited. It was funny. We did have that moment, and this being the 600 and some episode of On Brand, but really beyond what we probably traditionally think of as branding and marketing, is branding and marketing, but really building a brand. And you kind of had that, hey, I'm a culture guy, right? Beforehand. And I think to me, that's a no-brainer. But I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the role culture plays in your brand building. Why is that? And how can we get past it?
Yeah, it probably has something to do with the kind of stage and season that you're in. I'm actually marketing as my background, and yet I've evolved and become really a culture person. And I think in the early days, you're faking it till you make it. That's kind of the marketing side. Like when my dad started the business, we do all modalities and all manufacturers, and you have to have like this big outward presence to kind of get to be known. And then it starts to shift from like being known to actually the way you deliver products and services. The real marketing starts to become like how you execute. And so there's that blend. And so for me, the culture, as we are a service organization here at Block Imaging, serving medical imaging and biomedical devices at hospitals nationally. And so really marketing, it has become the way that our team delivers products and services. That's at least how I look at it once you've gotten a business to scale.
Yeah. So in People Matter at Work, you write that trust rarely breaks in a single moment. It erodes through small, I think an important point you have in there, well-intentioned decisions made without connection. Can you share what those moments look like? Because I think it's important for us to understand how to see them, because I think, especially with that well-intentioned part, easy to miss.
Yeah, and so much of it's what we're focused on, right? We're focused on performance. We're focused on growing the business, succeeding, making good decisions, and yet forgetting that people's lives aren't moving at the pace that we had a team member last night. A beautiful story. They're foster parents, and they had a child dropped off at their house last night. So like, when I get up in the morning and I think about, oh, well, we have a strategic meeting where we're going to drive this or that forward, I have a team member who I just ran into this morning whose entire life was flipped upside down. And so well-intentioned can be like, am I going to take my strategy and make it well-intentioned, or am I actually going to slow down and recognize like this team member who's been with us a long time and his wife have a very, very different day today than they expected at 4:00 yesterday. So that's just a real world example of what I think it looks like to build trust in the moments that maybe aren't even totally work related.
So one of the ideas in the book makes me think of, and I think I'm getting it right, that what's the old saying that culture eats strategy for lunch?
Breakfast or lunch.
One of the meals, whichever one you're going to make a hearty meal out of strategy for. But one of your big ideas is that culture, to that end, collapses quietly long before performance does. So I feel like, speaking of good intentions, with culture, we kind of want to get it right, but we also kind of go through seasons of working on it, dealing with it, and we kind of set it and forget it. is there a canary in the coal mine when it comes to when the culture might be in danger of collapsing?
Well, the culture is going to be a reflection of the leaders, right? I mean, and one of the dangers of writing a book on culture is that you actually equip manipulative, poorly intentioned leaders, and you give them tools with how to take advantage of people. And so this is not to how to take someone who wants to just cannibalize a company and make them seem a little shinier or nicer. This is actually like if you stand in a room and you have 100 leaders who say they care about people, and yet, when you ask the people who they're led by, do you feel cared for by the leader? There's a gap, right? 100% said they cared for people, and 62% said they feel cared for. And so, really, the purpose of People Matter at Work is how do we close that gap, providing tools to take someone who's well intentioned and maybe missing the mark, and actually their heart is not coming through. So that's for someone who's culture building, I don't know, is as much of a technique as it is like how do we embody the values that we carry as leaders.
Yeah, you talk about the downside of writing a culture book is you've got a manual for manipulation, and I feel like that's another common thread between culture and brand building, because having written a book about branding, you can absolutely apply that and do horrible things. And I think there's easy examples to take a look out there in the world and see. You talked about we both kind of started in marketing and have broadened that into other areas, mine being leadership storytelling, leadership communication, you talking about culture. And you talk a little bit about that label of soft skill. And boy, I cringe whenever I hear it, but I also feel like I've tried about 10 different explanations of why we should use something else, but it seems to persist. But you talk about um, really kind of a system around all of that. So, how does thinking of soft skills, culture as a system, change the way a leader approaches brand building?
Sure. It did not start as a system, right? It started as becoming president of the organization and having it all starts with vision. Anything worth doing is like, and for me, that vision was what if we could create a place where people love to work and didn't just love to work, but were challenged to become someone they never dreamed of becoming, and they'd go home and they'd feel fulfilled and connected to the mission and respect their leaders and all that sort of stuff. And so then I kind of tripped across three T's that were just an expression of my leadership and how I wanted people to feel on the other side of me. And so when I think about the marketing and culture together, it really collides in like an organizational identity is saying exactly who you are, exactly what you stand for, the values that you're after. We call them thriving mindsets that we're pursuing. And then fortunately, it starts to become a magnet that draws, just like you would try to draw a certain type of customer. It draws team members who want to be a part of that, and then it repels team members who don't.
Yeah. So you talk about systems, and I think it's important because it's the difference between kind of big ideas that sound good on a podcast versus how do you actually put this to work. And another thing that you do that with is the practice of or the shift from me leadership
Mm-hmm.
to we leadership. And I feel like that's another one of those things that people are like, yeah, nod along, like the sound of that, but we don't always know exactly how to do that. So where does the doing come in with we leadership versus me leadership?
Well, it's as you the word that just kept resonating as you're asking the question is humility. And even when you go back to systems building and enacting a healthy culture, is like nobody wants to be a systems builder if they want to be the hero. Because ultimately, like in the early days of like customer resolutions, I thought to myself, like, and people would look at me and just say, wow, you're really good at that thing. And then you do it enough times that you begin to realize, like, there's basically 5 or 6 steps to all of these conversations. Everyone's unique, and heroes love unique situations that can never be systematized, right? Is because it relies on me to be great at what I'm great at. But when we actually start to be humble enough to say, wait a second, I want other people to learn how to do this, and I'm going to kind of show a pathway, and I'm going to empower you with these 5 steps or this operating system or whatever it is. It is really fascinating to see us be able to democratize capabilities in a way that arrogance kind of leads to a lack of systemization.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about systems and everything else when it comes to leadership, it makes us, we tend to armor up, and we hear a lot
Sure.
about vulnerability, but that one word you talking about humility, and I wish I could remember where I heard this. It was on a podcast this week, but someone talked about the definition of humility being admitting that you still have more to learn. And I thought that's great.
It's
And it's
great.
like, I feel like more people would sign up willingly for humility if they had a definition like that to work from.
Yeah, humility oftentimes is described as thinking less of yourself. And yet, I talk about in the book is humility is just having an accurate picture of your strengths and weaknesses. And so, as we've grown as an organization, it's so fun to stop and look and say, like, there are things to this day that I am the best person in the organization to handle. It's gotten very, very small. And then there are other things that are happening in this organization. We have people who are fixing CT scanners and MRIs and doing all sorts of parts repairs in this complex radiology space. You could give me 5 lifetimes and I wouldn't ever be able to do the things that the team is doing in this facility and around the world. And I think that is the true piece of humility, is this kind of the opposite of this know-it-all syndrome, that I have people on this team that are doing things I could never dream of doing. And I think there's a beauty of just waking up every day and saying, like, not this insecurity, like, oh, I'm not good at anything, or on the other side, this arrogance, I'm great at everything. There's this middle of the road, which is like, I can do some things really, really well, and there are other people who can do things I could never dream of.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. So, one thing that really drew me to your story, you're very candid about decisions that looked responsible on paper that fracture trust. How can a leader tell when a decision is technically correct, but maybe culturally costly?
Yeah, it's sometimes when it comes to culture building and really trust building, and we talked about trust a while ago, but this idea that, like, would you look out for me? Like, would you make the best, if I were like your what's it called, like, power of attorney, would I make the best decision for you? And so, yeah, that piece of, like, I even, one of the things I've been thinking about in this realm lately is the things that I would have cared about at 25, I don't care as much about at 44 because I have a corner office now. And so one of the things I talk about in People Matter at Work is workspaces. And people are spending a lot of time in their workspaces. And so that can be kind of one of those things that we diminish as small, not that important. The people are just whining. And it's like, if you were to go work in that workspace underneath the cold air dispenser or the bright lights or whatever it is, you might feel very differently. And so for me, this idea of, like, we talk about thoughtful decisions, using careful consideration, not just of the golden rule, what I want, but what other people desire in their season of life and in their situation and so forth.
So we talk about, and speaking of workplaces, I was going to talk about people mattering, and you literally have people matter on the wall behind you, as folks watching video can see. But your book emphasizes that values have to be operationalized. And I think sometimes we make it to I always, date myself thinking of the mall kiosks that no longer
Sure.
exist, where
Sure.
you could buy the posters of like the eagle coming at success,
Yeah.
and all of these things. And I feel like sometimes we make it to the poster level of the values,
Sure.
but
Sure.
we don't always do a great job of bringing them to life. So, how can leaders take specific cultures that have value to the team and model a way for bringing those to life?
Yeah. The only thing that's worse than not having values is having values and not live by them, right? And so I think that sometimes when you go to the mall and you buy the accessories or whatever they are, is values. It's far better for a leader to not go searching for values, but to actually unearth them. What is inside of you? And if at the end of the day, all you care about is growing the business to 150 million so that you can sell it to private equity and you can buy a yacht, then put that on the wall because people will follow you. I mean, there will be certain people who are drawn to
Yeah.
that, but just be honest with what you are. If you are not a generous person, then don't make generosity your value. It's much easier to live by values that are unearthed and like pulled out of yourself than something you've kind of picked off of a poster on a website or something. Or it'll sound really great if we put integrity up there. And you know how, and then you draw someone who really has a high value for integrity. They stay for 6 months and they realize that you have integrity on the wall, but absolutely no intention toward living with integrity.
Well, and when we come back to that too, it does bring us back to that overlap of culture and brand, because what that is a brand disconnect. If you're
Absolutely.
saying this but not really not doing that as well. So when it comes to brand, you talk about building from the inside out. What internal work has to happen before external brand storytelling can take the baton, be authentic, be credible?
Yeah, I mean, so again, we talked about the unearthing of values, and then we have the mining for stories. So the person who wrote the foreword to my book is a dear friend, Krista Catrola, and she in her 20s had a health scare. And when you're in your 20s, depending on your story, health is not as prominent of a topic as when you get older. And so we started talking about this idea of second chance at life, and imaging started really becoming important to us. It went from
Mm.
kind of a business to like a key part of who we are. And so today in our mission statement is a second chance at life for people. And so for us, a lot, and now we talk about like the number of people who are scanned on the devices that we service, and when we bring healthcare to the forefront, and ultimately just recognizing that when someone calls for a part, the team that's right outside my office who's providing imaging parts, like that part is the difference between Aunt, Aunt Teresa getting served and scanned this afternoon versus getting pushed to Monday. And so we actually take like what we do, connect it to real stories, and then ultimately that impacts the service we provide, the brand that we carry is really meaningful in that way.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you are kind of, with when it comes to imaging, I would say a poster child for a complex B2B brand that more often than not, when I encounter folks working in that space, there's kind of I always joke, it's kind of the woe is me B2B. It's like, well, we can't do any of that fun stuff, any of that stuff with story. We can't be Nike telling stories about great athletes overcoming obstacles. But what you're talking about is every bit as powerful. So, can't do that one.
Yeah, that's I have a friend who owns a t-shirt company, and I think about like the idea. Oh, we just make t-shirts, and then it's like we make t-shirts for fifth grade softball teams that like the way that people laugh when they come together and they play basketball, or girls play volleyball for the first time, or whatever it is, to think about the joy that happens in that space and the way that we contribute. So yeah, there's some businesses that it's very, very hard to tie a meaningful purpose to. But I am so thankful that we've had the privilege of being in the healthcare space because of the depth of meaning and purpose that it brings.
I'm glad that you remembered the name of the mall kiosk and items, Successories. But I talked about the eagle. The other one was like the mountain. And I think sometimes culture can feel like a mountain.
Mhm.
And for leaders in organizations who realize that their culture is already strained, it can feel like a mountain. But your book emphasizes the idea of repair over perfection. And I think in so many ways, I think that's an important dynamic to understand. But talk about the value of repair versus going off a cliff, going towards
Yeah.
perfection.
Yeah. I mean, I've been speaking of t-shirts, I'd like to make a t-shirt that says perfection is an illusion.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just, it's a mirage. And yet repair, it's not the best relationships that they're not void of conflict. They just don't know how to repair. And so there's situations. And if there's high trust, for someone to be able to walk into my office and say, hey, we had a conversation and I shared something with you, and man, it just didn't feel like you cared. It didn't feel like you saw me. And that's where we then have the opportunity to say, man, I really am sorry for the way that I treated you. But in a place where that's kind of the minority of situations, you have the opportunity to repair. In a place where you just diminish people all day long, they know that's part of your character. There's no reason to pursue forgiveness or repair or restoration because the relationship is insignificant. You are there as a gold mine that they can just capture and capitalize and take advantage of, versus kind of what I think of as a garden where everyone benefits from the growth. And so that's what comes to mind.
So we've talked about repairing culture. We've talked about some of the challenges along the way. If someone's out there listening and thinking, well, I kind of wonder because and again, another similarity between culture and brand is, oh, is that working? I don't know if I know. And so if they're scratching their head, is there a rapid test for culture?
I think there's never a rapid test for anything that's really, really meaningful in life. But I would say that the Gallup surveys are great. I mean, they're really meaningful. We do one once a year and we have extremely high levels of engagement. And it really is my report card as a leader. But one of the like, if you were looking for a rapid test, it'd be laughter, like smiling and laughter. And people walk into our facility and they're like, wow. Sometimes they comment that people stopped working and said hello. Sometimes they comment that people kept working like we weren't even there. Whatever it is, they can feel a difference. And that's true if you walk into Chick-fil-A versus McDonald's or any places. I mean, it's almost, I talk about it in People Matter at Work, is it's almost like the air in a room is no one cares about oxygen until it's gone. And then all of a sudden it becomes a very, very important conversation. And so it's almost like the atmosphere. And so it sounds maybe a little silly, but if the two of us walked into a building, whether it's the 23rd floor in Manhattan or whether it be our facility or a restaurant, you can tell the culture of, let's go to Taco Bell. You walk up to the front counter, you can learn a lot about the manager in about 6 minutes, right? How clean it is and how much the person, how responsive they were and all that sort of stuff. And so culture impacts everything and everyone, regardless of our belief in its existence. And so, yeah, I would say that laughter, though, to give you the short answer, it would be that safe environments have laughter, unsafe environments don't.
I love that answer, man. I kind of threw you a hardball there at the end, just because I was genuinely curious, and I think that's great. Are people laughing here? That's something you can go.
Yeah.
That's not a survey you need to deploy, but it's a helpful rapid
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
Well, whether it's been Successories or anything else, I've been laughing and smiling throughout this conversation. Josh, I now get to ask you for a brand that has done that for you, that's made you smile recently?
Yeah, I the one that comes to mind as like politically provocative as it is right now was really the buying experience at a Tesla dealership. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I've been to some car dealerships in my life, and it feels, if I had to choose between the dentist and a car dealership, it'd be a tough call. And just the smooth, the user interface, the connection, the service orientation, I left and was just very, very impressed with the Tesla experience.
That is awesome. Well, one last question, much easier. Where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So if you're interested, blockimaging.com is kind of the business side. If you're interested in learning more about this medical imaging company that I'm standing in today. Also, peoplematteratwork.com is a great spot to learn more, as well as the book is available anywhere that books are sold, including Amazon. And you're also welcome to reach out to me at josh at peoplematteratwork.com.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Josh Block, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.